black people, needless to say, were successful all over the world. And when the white man started selling and exploring, everywhere he went, he found black people. Christopher Columbus, when he came to America, as I understand, he went to South America. He found people of color, the Indians. Many people say that the African was here before the Indians. And the African and the Indians, they fought, and consequently, they began to marry each other. Needless to say, the Europeans, once they were let out of Europe, wherever they went, they conquered the people. Wherever they went were people of color. And whenever a people conquer another people, the spoils of war is always the woman. Always the woman. And so this European deposited his seed in women of color all around the world. The early Arabs, or the early, in Saudi Arabia, for instance, they were black people. They were black as the night. The word Saudi means black, just like Ethiopia means burnt face. Sudan means black. Black people all over the world. But I like to get to, because our young children, as I've said before, they asked me, Dad, they call me Poppy, my grandchildren. They said, do we do anything? I said, yes. And so I showed them this map. I'd like for you all to see this map, pass it around if you would. It's a map of Africa. Now what's interesting about that map, what they call the Middle Ages was always considered Africa. It wasn't until the late 1800s, 1902, around 1902, that they started calling that the Middle Ages. I mean the Middle East.
About what year?
Around 1902, in American.
Okay.
But before that, it was one British guy who used the term Middle East. It was always Northern Africa. And I remember Imam Muhammad saying that the so-called Middle East was so close you could throw a rock from Africa to, that's pretty close. That's pretty close. One of my favorite subjects, and I can do away with all this paperwork. Some more to Spain. Good God. It takes about 15 hours a day to go from Africa to Spain. First in car and then on a ferry. You can get there in about 15 hours. But they were actually invited to come. And so they came, and within 1 hour, they defeated the Europeans. Upon their arrival, they found that the Europeans were illiterate. They couldn't read and write. They lived in barns with animals. They had all kinds of diseases. They didn't bathe, they stink. I looked at the picture the other day with Robin Hood. And this man was blind, and he was talking to him, and he said, you're welcome to stay here, but the first thing you got to do is take a bath. You stink. And so these black Africans, and I'm emphasizing black because the man who wrote the book, The Moors of Spain, he emphasized. He said, yeah, they spoke the language, but they were black as the night. They were black as the night. He said the only thing that was white about them were their teeth and the horses that they rode. And they went into Europe and they civilized Spain. Oh man, they advanced. They had colleges and they opened up universities and they taught algebra and geometry and the higher mathematics and the higher sciences. And it was 100 years before Italy had street lights. They were that advanced. And so people from all around the world started going there. And they were there for 800 years. It's interesting to me because when I grew up, they always said that blacks were illiterate. They never contributed anything to society. But here we find out about the Moors of Spain who civilized the white man. Taught them how to bathe, taught them how to read and write, taught them how to build houses, how to build colleges and universities. All kinds of inventions came during this period of time. They were kicked out of Spain in 1492 by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. 1492. The writer of the book said it was a sad day because he said had they remained in Spain, they would have advanced the world by 500 years. Now, I always say they were black, they were this and that, but the reality is they were Muslim. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he turned the light on because he chose a man by Muhammad. And he revealed to Muhammad this holy Quran. And that turned the light on for the Arabs, for the Africans, and eventually the whole world. We all benefited as a result of one man, Muhammad the Prophet. God, peace be upon him. Had he not come, we would have killed each other off. There wouldn't be any world. I don't believe it because we were savages. In Arabia, they referred to that time as the days of Jahiliyyah, days of ignorance. If a girl baby had been born first, they would have killed her. She couldn't have committed the sin. She was a brand new baby. But during that time, the custom was that a boy was everything. And so they actually were ashamed. If they had a baby before they had a boy, they would bury it in an open grave. And the question is asked on the day of judgment, for what sin was I killed? They killed people for no reasons. And they paid the family money. In a way, maybe that's more civilized than today because they kill you today, you don't get a dime. Wives have to go on with a family with no father. Children have to go on without a mother or a father. Interesting. In 325 AD, the Nicene Council was formed. I think it's important because during that time the church was divided. And they were divided over the issue of whether or not Jesus Christ was divine or whether he was not divine. The oneness of God or whether they believed in the Trinity. And so, long story short, those who believe in the Trinity put to death the man called Arius and his believers, those who believed that God was one, and they destroyed the books, the Bibles that they had. You know, we hear today how people burn the Qurans. This is not something new, this is old. They burned thousands of books during that time. There was a concerted effort to hide the accomplishments of black people. The picture that many of us had in our home of Jesus was a picture of a Caucasian. His real name was Caesar Borgia. Wasn't Jesus? I remember in one of the meetings at Mont, the white Christian lady said, chances are some of the people in this room look more like Jesus than the pictures we got in our home. Talk about the black men in the room. The Bible describes Jesus. He was dark-skinned with nappy hair. The same thing is true about Solomon and Solomon's children. They were dark-skinned. And during the life of Jesus, he was told, or it was told, that he should go down into Egypt to hide. Now, if he was Caucasian, he couldn't hide in Egypt. Those people were dark. Same thing was said about Sarah. They said she was fair. When they said she was fair, it didn't mean she was white. It meant that she was beautiful, but she too was a black woman, the wife of Abraham. So wherever the white man went, he found black people. And as he did here in America, well, first of all, he enslaved black people all over the world, wherever he went. We went on a cruise, and it was interesting to me, all throughout the Caribbean, black people. But what was interesting to me was the islands that we went on was St. Martin, St. John, St. Lucia, St. Thomas. I mean, every one of them. So that lets us know that the early Catholics marked their territory. They went all over the world, and wherever they went, they found you. And so we were captured. You know, we see on TV where women and children are being snatched away from each other. That happened to us. They came to Africa, and they snatched us away from our mothers and our fathers, our sisters and our brothers. Many of them never to be seen again. They took our babies. They put us on a slave ship, and they brought us to America, chained. We urinated on each other. We defecated on each other. We didn't have fresh food to eat. We didn't have clean air. But still, our black women were raped. But not only black women, black men were raped also. They were sodomized, especially the one we call the alpha male. And this Caribbean, we're talking about the Caribbean, this is where they broke the spirit of the black man and brought him to America as a slave. We hear of the story of Nat Turner, but that was only one. There were hundreds of Nat Turners. We never heard about it. We never heard about it. I'm going to wrap this up because I know that I only had 20 minutes, but I had to get that out. I always wondered about why America seemed to hate Haiti. Haiti was one of the first African nations that fought the powers that be and won. The general's name was Toussaint Louverture. He fought him, he won, he kicked the French out. Years later, Napoleon came back and defeated him, and he died in prison. And then we also know about Cuba. Why did America hate Cuba so? Cuba was full of blacks. There was racism in Cuba. But when Castro came, he eradicated racism. He said, you're simply one people Cuban. And when he came, when the revolution came, they kicked out the Americans with their drugs and their prostitution. And that's why we hated them so much. And so I said all that to say, that black people were taught that they were nothing, that they were ugly. They hated their nappy hair. They hated their thick lips. They hated their black skin. But something happened in America. Your brother-in-law used to be the man, Rahman. Jamil Rahman said a phenomenon happened in America. And he was called the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So many of our people didn't experience the Honorable Elijah Muhammad right off. If they did, they didn't even know him. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was taught by Master Farad Muhammad. And much of what he taught may not have been the truth. But we needed something to shock us, and he shocked us. The white man said we wasn't nothing, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, you are the original man of the earth, but not only that, you are God of the universe. That was a shocker. I mentioned the Honorable Elijah Muhammad because the other day at Salat al-Juma, on the way in, I picked up Abdullah Muslim, and he put in a tape of Qasim Ahmed. He was in Atlanta speaking. And he was talking about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And he was giving the people hell because they didn't realize how great the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was. And he talked about his life before the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He talked about how he lived a gutter life. And most of us lived a gutter life, man. All we knew was pimps and whores, prostitutes. We didn't respect ourselves. We didn't respect our women. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us to love ourselves, to love our black skin, our nappy hair, to love our woman, put on a pedestal, to love your family, to get off the drugs and the alcohol. Let me tell you something, that in itself is phenomenal, because all of the doctors, all of the psychiatrists, all of the psychologists have not been able to do these things. But he did this with what little al-Islam he had. He only had a third-grade education. But look at what he did. And black people actually did hate themselves. They hated their color. I was born in a family with 8 siblings. I was the darkest one. My sister used to give me hell. She'd call me, you little black spies. She called me all kinds of things. I didn't know what black was. I didn't know what was black. So it didn't mean nothing to me, but I understood what my mother was doing. She was trying to prevent my sister from becoming pregnant. So she would send me with her when she'd go to a girlfriend house. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was the one who was responsible for us to start loving each other because of his words. And his word reached the heart of a man called James Brown, who made a record, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. And most people didn't even know that that inspiration for that song came from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And Imam Muhammad once met with James Brown, and he was thanking him. He said, why are you thanking me? I got that from your father. So praise be to Allah, the Lord of all worlds. I wanted to get that out. Very important, because in our sojourn here, even in slavery, we made thousands of contributions to this society. Many times, black people were not able to get a patent, but they were responsible for these many inventions, including your cell phone, including the lights, the green light when you leave here and you come to a stop, and so many other things, thousands, tens of thousands of things. And I ended by saying this. You talk about a patriot, 400 years of slavery, suffering, and death, and still the black man fought in every war. Think about that. In every war to defend this country. So if I want to take a knee, it should be okay, because I was on the front line. And sometimes they fought with no gun. They didn't even have a gun, but they was on the front line of the battle. fighting to defend this country, America. And if you ask most black people in America, even after 400 years of slavery, suffering, and death, they would tell you they don't hate white folk. Now, if that ain't a Muslim, I don't know what is. Because Allah says in the Quran, do not let the hatred of another cause you to swerve from justice. So I think my time is up. I said pretty much what I wanted to say. So I can tell my children and grandchildren, yes, we made great contributions to this society. We continue to make great contributions to this society. And Imam Muhammad said that the fact that I put that brother to sleep.
No, it had nothing to do with you. Great presentation.
The black president did more for us than anything that could have happened. For our children to see that a black man rose to the highest position in this country, and they now know that they can become the president of the United States of America. Imam Muhammad said that even before he was elected, he kept saying very good things about Barack Obama, and he said he had very good antennas. I don't know if he was still alive when Barack got in office, but a lot of what he said came to be true. So I think pretty much that's it. If you got any questions?
Well, first of all, I want to say a great presentation. In terms of the title, you can put at the end of it, exclamation point. And if you happen not to have any of those in your toolbox, at the end of it, put ouch. I would say, it comes off as a question, and I think the answer to that is you're speaking to a particular genre, and we are responsive to that, not only in the context of the genre that you presented, but probably almost every other genre. As for an example, the white man's ice is colder. You take the black doll test. They redid that, and they found that the findings were, shall we say, weren't dissimilar. It's very, very, pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And then there's, as it relates to business, as African Americans, we have to get by on the 2% of support, and the white man gets about 100%. His 98, and our 2%. So that's very, very unfortunate, but something that has to change, and it's up to us to change it. And you know what? Let me just say this too, because the whole thing about it is that it's racism. And I remember what the Imam said related to racism, and what he said was racism is nurtured and preserved in religion. So we need to work with the oppression in religion as it relates to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So those are the things we need to address.
Everybody talks about Egypt and its greatness, and the fact that there were black people. I know in the 25th dynasty with the Kushites, they took over Egypt. But my question is, why is it now controlled by people that don't look like us? You go to Egypt, or you go to a lot of these other countries now that predominantly should be black countries that they're controlled. And I put forth this is racism and religion. And the controlling people, the controlling countries now, like North America, Europe, stuff like that, are white folks. And they control beauty standards or whatever. So the women want to look white. So they ain't gonna marry nothing but somebody light. And the lighter person get the better job, just like what used to be here. So.
The original people in those countries were black. But when the invaders came, who were white,
When they come
they
from,
left their seed. Came from various parts. I think Imam Muhammad told us the first whites showed up in India. They came down to the Dravidians. Yeah,
You got it.
yeah, the Arabians came.
Yeah.
That's where they went to Egypt.
but that happened all over. Wherever they invaded, they conquered the men, and the spoils of war is always the women. Now the same thing happened when we went into Spain. We conquered the men, the spoils of war is the women. And the women became brown eyes instead of blonde hair and blue eye. And what happens is, there's a movie out, I'll tell you this, maybe you can go rent it today, called True Romance. And this guy said he was Sicilian. And the guy they were gonna kill said, "Oh, you Sicilian now?" He said, "Give me a cigarette." He said, "You a coconut." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "When the Moors of Spain invaded Spain, they screwed your women. And they screwed them so bad that they have niggas. I mean, the children would have niggas. Thus where the Sicilians go." Yeah,
Called True Romance.
True Romance. And it starts off real slow, but once the action starts, you're on the edge of your seat. But they kill him. The Sicilian guy, the mob, kills this guy. I knew you was gonna kill him once he called him a nigga. You knew he was gonna kill him. But that happened all over the world. It happened all over the world.
One of the things about control, you say about control, you take the quote unquote jazz festival. We are the entertainment, but I understand it's the Italian of Sant'Angelo's who's the one who's running it. You know, well, okay, all right. So who's running it now?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, initially for extended
Yeah, for a
period,
long time.
for extended period, we were all the entertainment. So, and you know what's interesting about that? When they were running that, there was a lapse, and the lapse was the boycott. Remember when the boycott? So that mean the ball had to be picked back up again. Why didn't we pick it up? Remember the boycott of the jazz festival back years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, I like to say this before I sit down, because I think it's important. When Imam Muhammad went to Palestine, he had a guide. Black, for all purposes, he appeared to be a big black man. Later on, I see him in a different video, and he says, "These Jews who are here now, first of all, these are not the original Jews. The original Jews were black. And President Nasser, who was president of Egypt before Anwar Sadat, he said when the Jews left, they left black. When they came back, they were white. So the Jews that came back were from America and from Europe. They were not the original Jews. But he says when they talk to him, or they talk to the Palestinians, they call them Cushites. Cushites is another word for nigger, he said.
Kafir. Kafir is another word for nigger.
What is it?
Kafir.
Kafir.
Okay, kafir.
Yeah, it was one thing. I don't know if everybody knew. You talked about the two dogs. I meant to mention that. The
White dog, black dog.
test. Yeah, the white dog and the black dog. And they asked a little girl, which was a pretty dog, and she chose the white dog. 60 years later, they did the same test, and the little black girl still chose the white dog. And our children at an early age, they got a good sense of what's going on. TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, all promote white beauty.
Yeah, whiteness.
So that's why so many of us end up trying to bleach our skin,
Get our nose pointed,
get our nose pointed like Michael Jackson,
get our hair fried.
hair fried, get blue eyes and green eyes. Now I know about the bleaching cream, because I tried to bleach myself a little lighter back in the 60s, because my sister kept calling me black. So it was some cream out, I can't remember the name, but I tried to bleach myself a little bit lighter.
You know what's interesting to me is that black is beautiful. Now, here's the context that I'm giving by black is beautiful. The black in the beauty industry, in terms of money, is huge. Mm-hmm. What I'm speaking to more specifically is the eyelashes, the eyeliner. Mm-hmm. what people use, they put that on to beautify themselves. They put that on to have some definition. That's a lot of money in that industry.
Oh, yeah.
And it's black. You know the eyeliner, that black.
Yeah.
I'm beautifying myself by doing that. The people who are the fair skin, you know, that's what they do. They use that black to beautify themselves. If you had the cash register on that, you'd be doing real good.
Yeah. and
If you had the cash register on wigs, then
yeah, the hair, that's what I was gonna
What's
say.
the other
Koreans
thing
got
that
the
they-
mark on it.
yeah.
Mhm.
they take what they call a partial hair.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
You know, that's controlled by the Koreans. You know,
Mhm.
I seen a book one time where in a Korean shop, and I don't know if the guy wanted me to see it or not.
Mhm.
You know, it was said how to market to the American Negro. So they got a plan before they come over here.
Yeah,
How to market to us, how to sell to us.
yeah.
You know, what things we like.
Mhm.
You know, and they say there's, you know, the Chinese too. There's more Chinese restaurants in the United States than Colonel Sanders.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
because they knew they couldn't work nowhere else.
Yeah.
But they opened their own place up.
The Koreans, the Arabs, and others. I mean, it used to be the Jew.
Everybody.
He used to have the lock on it
Yeah.
because he provided us with food, clothing, and shelter, and that's how he controlled us.
Like Benz, right?
Benz was a big part of it.
Ben's Goodwill on Burn.
Yeah.
But you know what? All the different ethnicities, they need what's called an economic plan. And for many of them, African American is the economic plan. That's the economic plan.
You know, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
We the economic plan.
That we should have made by now.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he found out the key, and the key was to be able to provide for us food, clothing, and shelter. Because whoever provides you food, clothing, and shelter controls you. And that's what they found out with the American Indian. As long as the buffalo was alive, the Indians were independent. So the white man killed off all the buffalo, and he took a picture with 1,000,000 buffalo and the white man standing on top. So the Indians didn't have any more food, they didn't have no clothing, they didn't have no shelter. So they had to turn to the white man. And once he did, he collected all of their children, took them to a boarding school, cut their hair, and taught them Christianity. And I conclude with this. The name of this presentation was, Why Do We as African Americans Accept Other Cultures and Leaders in Preference to Our Own? Thank you, God.
I just